very happy to be here. We are going to be interviewing a few people from our organizations, and I will be here with the help of my other friend, Hannah.
Yeah, so I'm Hannah. I'm also going to be help facilitating today. So just some reminders about how the session works. It's going to be similar to how the community partners webinar was the other day, but we'll just be doing some prepared questions first, and then we'll get into a Q&A at the end. So write down any questions you might have and feel free to ask those at the end.
All right, so let's meet our panelists. So first we're going to have Kennedy, who is here with Pole Hero Project. Do you want to tell us more real quick about what your organization does?
Yeah, I apologize. That was like an awkward pause on my part. Hello, my name is Kennedy Mattis. I am a co-founder of Pole Hero Project. The work of our project and our mission are quite simple. We recruited young people to become poll workers for the November election.
Perfect. And they were very successful too. We'll learn more about that though later. Next up, we have Amna with her work in political and social activism.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amna Rustam. I'm a fourth year here at OSU. I'm studying communications. And over this summer, my friends and I founded an organization called Cincinnati for Justice. We organized a variety of different things from protests to community drives like clothing and food drives. And we also did some anti-racism workshops. So that's a lot of the work that I've been doing. And I also run an Instagram page called Activism Resources.
All right, and last but not least, Ashni and Shreya with their new organization, Classmates.
Hi, I'm Shreya, and I'm being joined by Ashni. We are co-founders of a free tutoring organization called Classmates. We started this in March or April when the COVID-19 pandemic kind of first hit Ohio, and we did this kind of in response to a lot of people losing their educational resources because of the pandemic. We thought that a good way to help relieve some of those issues was to give these kids free tutoring. So yeah, that's a little bit about Classmates.
Okay, and so then before we begin, we would be remiss if we didn't mention the violent insurrection that happened yesterday at the U.S. Capitol and the wrongdoing that happened there during that time. So while these questions were prepared before yesterday, so none of them directly reflect and address that situation. Due to it being, prepared prior, we will engage in conversation about the situation if any of the panelists want to discuss that, or if you guys have questions for our panelists about that. So we just wanted to address that real quick before we got started. Okay, so with that, we're going to move into the first of our questions. So our first question for panelists are, what has your organization done that you are most proud of? And what do you think is the impact that their organization has had so far to date?
Whoever feels ready, just feel free to speak on this one.
Sure, I'll go ahead and kick it off. So Cincinnati for Justice, I would say our biggest accomplishment is just being able to mobilize and organize so quickly. We formed very early on in the summer, and it was just a core group of us that decided to get together and kick things off. And the next day we had planned a protest. About 500 people came out. We raised $1,000 in funds in under 24 hours. And so that kind of set the tone for the rest of the work we've done. We've just been able to organize and mobilize. And something that we're working towards now is creating our own mutual aid fund for folks in Cincinnati. So they'll be able to come to us if they have any monetary requests for things like medication or clothing. And we're also doing several clothing drives throughout the year. So we've really kind of taken our original mission and shaped it into be something that's sustainable. So we worked a lot in the Black Lives Matter movement, but we're working to create sustainable change in Cincinnati. So I would say that's our biggest accomplishment and what we're working towards now.
And to follow from that, so with Pole Hero, we officially started, I guess, in July, but it kind of formed from off of a previous internship I started doing in May. But we ended with recruiting close to 40,000 young people across the country to be poll workers. It really would not have been possible without our amazing team. So we started with 7 co-founders, and then we ended up expanding to 108 volunteers from around the country and world. We were lucky to be featured in many local and national publication and broadcasts. some of which include the Today Show, NPR, NBC News. One thing that we were most excited about was after we were featured in the news, we would get messages and emails from adults and just families who said they weren't aware of the need for poll workers. And so after seeing just us kind of talk about the issue, they signed up themselves. And so while they aren't represented in our numbers because our numbers just include young people, we were ecstatic just to hear that people weren't aware of this issue. And after seeing us, they were aware, and then they proceeded to sign up to volunteer.
So our organization is a little bit different in terms of our scope, in the sense that it's a lot more work with individual families and individual students. And I'd say something that we're probably most proud of is just being able to have a tangible impact on these individual students and families' lives. We've had several parents tell us that their child's grades have gone up like they had never before because of their weekly tutoring sessions. And they've let us know that during this really just turbulent and difficult time where some of them have lost their jobs or they don't have time to work with their kids on school each night, it's really nice to know that their child is being assisted and that they don't have to pay for it. So hearing those individual stories is really heartwarming for us and really reminds us why this type of work is important in our community and every community.
That was really all beautifully said. But obviously you guys took steps to choose your activism piece. So what led you there? Like, what's your background look like that brought you to where you are now?
I guess I'll start this question. I guess we'll rotate, we'll go. But I've organized and protested, written to senators on a variety of issues. But my background, I focus primarily on criminal justice reform and just working towards getting a fair system that isn't based on race and socioeconomic status. And so this summer, I was supposed to intern for my 4th summer with the Ohio Innocence Project. But as you could imagine, that fell through because we weren't able to volunteer in person. So it was around May, I started to look for other opportunities. And just knowing we had such a consequential election coming up in November, I knew I wanted to be a part of election efforts. And so that's when I interned for Vote 2020 by mail. And we just really, it was lucky that I guess that led to Poll Hero, but that's kind of how I ended up in this position because I knew I wanted to work on election efforts. And it ultimately happened because my other internship was canceled.
Yeah, so I'm from Centerville, Ohio, which is a suburb of Dayton. So is one of the other co-founders. She's also from Centerville. And then Ashley's from Columbus, so she's familiar with the area. And in March, actually, we found out that a free tutoring center that was in person in Dayton had gotten shut down because of the pandemic. And so that's kind of what really inspired us to do this. We thought, how can we help these people without having to see them in person? And we thought, why don't we do some sort of virtual tutoring program, since we know so many college students who have a lot of time right now and would definitely be willing to give just an hour a week even to helping some of these kids. A lot of us had tutored and mentored students before, and we thought that this was a really sort of accessible way for us to have an impact on this community. And we also all felt really fortunate to have had many sort of academic mentors and tutors from the communities that we grew up in. And it's kind of something that we just wanted to pass down to people who may have not necessarily had that type of network. So that's kind of how we all got into this.
So for me, I guess I've always kind of been drawn to activism and speaking out for people that can't always do so themselves. I didn't have a lot of experience organizing as such before this summer, but my friends and I came together kind of because we saw a need for the community and we wanted to find a way to be involved. And I identify as a Black Muslim American woman, so I'm Black. Black Lives Matter applies to me, it applies to my community. So I felt really drawn and connected to this cause because I see what my peers go through, I know what I've gone through, and we saw a need to be able to organize, especially from a young person's perspective. A lot of us didn't have any organizing experience, and we really wanted this opportunity to see and enact the change that we wanted to see in our own community. So we kind of took that, the time period, the experience, what we wanted to achieve. And it's just built from there. I mean, we didn't have necessarily a mutual aid in mind when we started in June, and it's manifested from what we've been able to create. But we did know that we wanted to make a change in our community. And we thought that that would be a good place to start, is by organizing and mobilizing people in the area.
Awesome. So we'll move on to our next question. So doing this work, we were wondering if you guys have had any setbacks, and if you have, if you could kind of talk about those and how you were able to get through that and move past it.
So we have had some setbacks for classmates. To list a few, technology has sometimes been an issue. Not all of our students have accessible devices at their homes to join from a virtual tutoring standpoint. So the way we solve this is we work with a local nonprofit in Dayton, and they're Dayton physicians. So they have been able to fund some laptops for some of these families who don't have access to this technology, which was really nice and helpful. And we have an ongoing partnership with them as well. And then another issue or setback we've had is miscommunication or lack of communication between students' guardians and the tutors in our program. It's kind of helped us to remember that the stressors of the COVID-19 pandemic and how they have impacted our daily concerns and commitments. And we have kept in mind that, everyone has a busy life right now, and communication has been hard for a lot of people. So we've been trying to make that as more accessible as we can. We're ensuring our tutors are reliable and committed to our mission statement, and that they have the students' best interest in mind. That's one way we've been trying to solve this communication issue. And then we've also been trying to do the same things for students and their guardians as well, and make sure that they're also committed. And tutors and students have been really patient throughout this process and understanding the continuously changing circumstances following the effects of the pandemic. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah, I think Ashley brings up a really good point about how the pandemic has affected any field of this kind of work. I know for Cincinnati for Justice in particular, when you're organizing these events, you really have to keep in mind how to keep people safe. Like, is it okay to actually have events? And in the summer, it was a lot different because we could meet outside and we actually could social distance, versus now some people in the group are like, we want to organize something. And, the rest of us are like, it's not safe, it's cold, and people aren't going to want to social distance. So that, I would say, has been a bit of a setback. And it's weird because we also started in the pandemic, similar to classmates, is something that we kicked off now, but we've still had to adapt probably what we would have done otherwise if we weren't in a pandemic, organizing protests and events and things like that. So I would say that has been a setback, but it's also created opportunities to engage with people online and all kinds of other facets. So it's been a setback, but also an opportunity at the same time. But it's hard to organize in a pandemic, and you want to be sensitive. People are sick, people are dying. It's an entire public health crisis. So you don't want to be insensitive to the reality of what's going on. But at the same time, racism is also very real in our society, and people are dealing with the ramifications of that all the time as well. So it's kind of finding that balance with that. Another setback, I would say, luckily it hasn't affected us too much, but I remember we were in one of our protests and somebody kind of gave the tip that there was like a right-wing group somewhere on our route. I never saw them. We never interacted with them. I don't know if it was true or not, but that's another thing, is just like the safety of people, and not just in terms of health, but in terms of physical violence. And as we referred to the events of yesterday, that was a very real threat throughout the summer, not only violence from the police, but violence from other right-wing militia groups, right-wing conservative groups that are, on the paths that we're marching on, or in the area, or organizing to interrupt BLM marches. So I would say that fortunately, We didn't have any direct interactions with these folks because that would have been a real setback for many reasons. But still, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about those things, and you have to keep the priority as safety for the folks that are with you, especially people of color and Black folks, especially when you're dealing with people like the police or, right-wing militias. That kind of speaks for itself. And then I would say a final setback, potential setback, I would say, is just, how quick change happens or lack thereof change. I would say we had several meetings across the summer. We met with the mayor of Cincinnati. We met with other city council members. We went to city council meetings. And it can be really disheartening and discouraging when you have a whole community of people saying one thing and you have elected officials and the mayor and the police saying another thing. So there's a lot of discourse happening and sometimes not a lot of tangible action happening from elected officials end. And so that can be frustrating when you're on the opposite side of organizing and trying to get your message across.
We also had a few setbacks. I think our biggest obstacle actually occurred during Poll Hero's predecessor, which was Vote 2020 by mail. To give a quick summary of what we were doing, we were trying to pass some federal bills that allocated funds for voting by mail protections. To give an example, one of the bills we were trying to push was the Vote Save Act of 2020. And so our daily operations included reaching out to the older generation, which some people know as boomers, through Facebook, and asking them to call and write to their elected officials to ask them to support these bills. As you could imagine, that was not successful. It's safe to say it was an epic failure. But it was good to go through that because it showed that the older generation was not going to be our target audience to create change. So that's when we shifted to students, especially being students ourselves. We had an idea of what might work to excite young people to work a 14-hour shift. And luckily it worked, and it kind of showed us that TikTok is, yet again, it proved to be a strategic organizing tool for young people.
All right. It seems pretty apparent that the problems that arose during 2020 is what created a lot of your organizations. But I would like to know, how do you see your mission growing as we move into 2021? Looking back on yesterday, I think it's obvious that a lot of your organizations are needed now more than ever. So what are some goals that you guys have set for yourself to do that?
Yeah, for Cincinnati for Justice, our main mission for 2021 is to launch our mutual aid. So I'm currently working on our website and working on a simple way for people to come apply for aid or provide or offer up a service. If they're a therapist or they own their own business and they're willing to provide a need for somebody else, just figuring out that way to enact tangible change beyond 2020 and beyond organizing protests, because we're not going to be protesting every day. But then at the same time, keeping up the pressure on our elected officials and organizing events when there needs to be events held. So I would say our main goal is to launch our mutual aid in 2021.
To add for Poll Hero, I think when we were recruiting poll workers, us as well as the other organizations, we fulfilled the need, the responsibility to recruit poll workers. But I think our larger goal really was to protect democracy and specifically protect the democratic process of voting. And so if you think about, if there's a shortage of poll workers, then you have polling locations that close, more people have to go to less locations, and then this inevitably leads to longer lines. And we saw in the primaries, those lines could last for 8 to 10 hours, and many people can't afford to wait in those lines. So if you think of the shortage of poll workers as one instance of voter suppression, it's like throughout this year, and we have for centuries seen so many other examples. To name a few, you have all of the nuances of voting by mail, you have access to voter drop-off boxes, you have voting ID laws, and you have gerrymandering. So it's like there is so much more work to be done in order to combat voter suppression. So we're just going to keep shifting as we see needs arise. But with our broad goal to remain as protecting democracy.
Yeah, so for us, we also definitely have some more work to do. We realized that these educational inequities existed before 2020, and the COVID-19 pandemic kind of just brought out how bad they were, and kind of also allowed me, Shreya, and Krithi, our other co-founder, to take the time to kind of sit down and educate ourselves and really think about what's been going on. So in 2020, we kind of just got ourselves off the ground, created a process for ourselves and structured ourselves, formed a smaller community of tutors and students, and really just formed a solid base. But in 2021, we do have plans of expanding more now that we do have a foundation that we feel is best for us and we feel more confident going in. We have plans to expand our board and bring more people in that do what the co-founders right now currently do. We want to involve more Ohio communities. Right now, we only do work in the Dayton community, but we slowly want to bring in Columbus and other large Ohio cities into our program as well. We want to redesign our website and create some sort of dashboard for students and tutors. We also kind of understand that technology is a huge thing right now, and none of us have great experience with technology, so we want to bring in some more people to help us kind of build a bigger platform online. And then also just continuing to advocate and educate ourselves on educational inequity. For example, we want to start sending out a newsletter to all of our tutors involved about the ongoing issues happening, just so everyone kind of stays up to date. And then that also relates to our mission statement of advocating for educational inequity.
Awesome. So kind of jumping off the idea of like educating ourselves and all that, who do you look up to in regards to activism, or who should our viewers keep an eye on with regards to your issues? And also, do you recommend any books, podcasts, anything like that for people to learn more about your social justice issue?
For me right now, and I know this is an extremely obvious answer, but I admire Stacey Abrams completely. I don't really think that needs an explanation. I mean, she tirelessly worked and turned Georgia completely blue. Poll Hero is nonpartisan. I realize I kind of gave away my party affiliation, but I guess for the shortage of poll workers, it was especially apparent this year because of the pandemic. But if any of the viewers find this compelling or just want to learn more about the shortage of poll workers, the persistence of it throughout the summer during the primaries and into the fall, if you just search Poll Hero, the poll worker shortage on Google, and we also on our website, pollhero.org, we have a tab where you can look at all of our features specifically, or you can just search Poll Hero Project on Google and the articles will come up as well.
So for us, we really look up to Angel Jones. She's an educator and researcher and does a lot of research and activism within the education realm, mostly among marginalized communities. And we discovered her through her activism Instagram profile, actually, and called Educators for Justice. This page brings a lot of light to issues like implicit bias, microaggression, social justice within the classroom. So we actually use a lot of the things that she posts about and a lot of info shared from her page to educate ourselves and then also our tutors from our own Instagram on how to best work with their individual students and empathize with their specific situations. And I know speaking for myself personally, but I think Shreya and our other co-founder Krithi are kind of in the same boat. We all come from like a pre-med science background. So coming into this organization, we didn't really know a whole lot about education and educational inequity and things like that. So we recognize that we have a lot more to learn, and that's our goal here. We want to make ourselves aware of even more activists within education. Angel Jones is just one that we know, but there's so many more out there, and our goal is to just continue to keep learning.
For me, I would say if I could pick people to look up to, I would say writers, Black women writers like Toni Morrison. I would say Kimberly Crenshaw, who has coined the term of intersectionality. I would say Angela Davis, an incredible scholar. The founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, including Patrisse Cullors. But I would say that I also really look up to grassroots organizations, all different kinds, because they do a lot of that groundwork and they connect people to causes. And, you know, they're doing the work. You know, Stacey Abrams worked with a lot of grassroots organizations. And so these are the folks that are getting out there and connecting people to causes. And so it's not necessarily just one or two figureheads for me. I would say it's all these different organizations that are working towards these goals in tangent with each other.
I will be looking up all those ladies later. So how do you want us as college students and active citizens and young adults to know about your issue or take away from this webinar?
Yeah, so as we all know, educational inequity is a problem everywhere, not just in Dayton. It's deeply rooted in our systems and can be really, really difficult to change these long-standing systems. However, what we can do as college students is help individual students and families. So if you're passionate about addressing inequities in your community and aren't really sure where to start with that, I can tell you that education through services like free tutoring would be a really good way to do that. It's tangible. It's something that we as college students have the tools to contribute to, given that we all made it here to Ohio State or wherever college you're joining us from. So if you're interested in tutoring with us, or if you think that your community would benefit from something like this, by all means, reach out to us because we would love to help as many communities as we can, as we said. Or if you're interested in starting something like Classmates for your own community, let us know that as well. We're open to sharing our resources just because we want to expand our reach as much as we're able to.
I would say, you know, I'm sure a lot of folks in here are not from Cincinnati, and that's okay. But I would say in terms of supporting Black Lives Matter and being an anti-racist person in general, you know, you need to have difficult conversations with people. And when people say racist things or they say a microaggression, you know, it's your duty to call them out or call them in, as some people say, and explain to them why what they're saying is harmful and what they should be doing instead. Provide them with reading materials, things they could look up on their own. I think we all have a responsibility when we're in these spheres and we hear something that's not okay. It's your role to say something, and it's really not okay to be neutral. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And I think that that's something everyone really needs to keep in mind moving forward. It's really not, there's not two sides when it comes to racism. Either you are racist or you are not racist, and you are not wavering somewhere in the middle. You need to be actively anti-racist. And that's something that everyone here can do on a daily basis. You don't need to be a part of an organization. You don't need to be volunteering. You need to be showing up in your day-to-day life, doing the research on your own, talking to your friends, and not relying on your Black friends, your friends of color. Do the research on your own and show up as an ally to them. And you can do that every day. That's work that doesn't stop. So I would say connect with other organizations if you want, but if you don't, do the own internal work, unlearn some of these dangerous things that we've been taught. I know for myself, like, I am slowly unlearning all these different things I learned in school that are either not true or only partially true, or we didn't get the whole story. And so it's a work, it's a lifetime of work, but it's worth it. And it's really important to do. So that's what I would say.
And I think a takeaway I would want the viewers to have is regarding just statistics on poll workers, some of which I was not aware of before researching this. So in past elections, only 8% of poll workers were 25 years old and younger. 58% of poll workers are ages 61 and older. And then the average poll worker age is 62. For me, this is shocking, especially after having worked a 14-hour shift and I was standing outside for 12 of those hours. It's physically demanding, and all of my friends who were poll workers as well can attest to this. So I just encourage people in future elections, when we don't have a looming pandemic, to keep this in mind and consider working at the polls. Also, besides protecting democracy, you get paid, which is a nice little bonus after that shift.
Okay, so then moving into one of our last questions before we go into the Q&A. How would you encourage others to make a difference in their communities? Any words of wisdom for those who maybe want to get involved in your issue or maybe seek a career in social justice?
I would say find out what issues you're passionate about and then find an organization that matches that. And so if you're, focused on food insecurity, there's so many organizations that deal with that. There's food banks, there's all kinds of different avenues. If you want to work on anti-racism efforts, there's other organizations like Cincinnati for Justice in whatever area you're in. If you want to work on criminal justice reform, prison reform, we have the Ohio Innocence Project that Kennedy alluded to before. So there's all different kinds of organizations depending on where you see yourself fitting the most, or where you find your passion, or where you find your expertise. So I would say, find the need that you want to be a part of the change of. So establish what that is that you want to achieve, and then, reach out to people. I know somebody, I think earlier, was saying that, people are messaging their Instagram account or whatever. If you find somewhere that you want to get involved, message them, ask how you can get involved, and then, volunteer when you can, show up when you can, donate money when you can. There's so many different ways to get involved, and not all of it is about time and money, so just finding where you can be an asset to all of these different groups, I think, is important. I know Shreya and Ashley were talking about how they have technological needs, and so they're going to be looking for people that are proficient in technology or engineering or whatever else that is. I know I'm currently designing our website. I'm not extremely proficient in that. So if somebody, were to help me with that, there's so many different needs, especially these smaller organizations have. So reaching out and asking how you can be an asset to them is probably the best way to get involved.
And just to add one thing to that, but if you see an injustice, do something. I always like to say Nike said it perfectly with their motto, just do it. So get involved. And to close just with a sentiment that we concluded our last Poll Hero meeting with our volunteers, but of all the organizations recruiting poll workers, Power the Polls was one. If that name sounds familiar, they had millions of dollars of funds. So when you see them recruiting hundreds of thousands of poll workers, it's because they have funds. You have More Than a Vote. They had LeBron James. I don't need it. I mean, that's why they're getting their numbers. We didn't have any resources. We just had young people, and we ended with close to 40,000 volunteers. So I think my message from that would be young people are more than capable of getting involved in creating change. So when it gets tiring, just keep going, because we can do it. You just have to keep persisting.
Yeah, I think that was really well said. For us, what we think is, assess the needs throughout your community, reflect on how you feel best equipped to help out. There's always going to be things requiring attention and reform, whether that's in your community or just around the country in general. Try to focus your energy on one issue that you are passionate about. That can often make more of a meaningful difference than trying to focus on too many things at once, even though we like to focus on too many things at once. And this is really important, but make sure you have a supportive network. Networking is really important. I think, for speaking on behalf of classmates, really one of the reasons why we were even able to take off is because we were able to form relationships with people who could help us out and who could give us resources and other people to talk to, and students who we knew were in need to help us fulfill our goal that we had. Networking is really important. Putting yourself out there, talking to other organizations that have similar goals and missions to help fulfill what you want to accomplish with your own organization, or joining those other organizations. So, yeah.
All right, I think we are going to move into our Q&A session now. We can go ahead and put all of these contacts into the chat. If you guys have any further questions or want to follow their Instagram, that'll be made available to you. And if you want to go ahead and start thinking or brainstorming questions for these organizations, you can put it in the chat, and then Hannah or I can read it out to them. All right, first question from Connor Jones. What are some barriers you foresee for your organization going forward, and how do you plan to overcome them?
I think for us, our very next experiment is not recruiting poll workers. We're actually trying to pass legislation in Virginia, because if you have a felony conviction in Virginia, you lose your ability to vote. So we're trying to pass the bills that get rid of that. And so we're kind of back to the issue we ran into with Vote 2020 by mail. It's how you get people excited to sign petitions, call their legislators. Because I think when we ask people to be poll workers, it's like you have this energy on social media that people want to get involved. And the position of being a poll worker, that's kind of a unique position, and you feel like you're important and you're doing something. Whereas I think that's sometimes hard to feel if you're just going through the motions of the democratic process, which work, but it still is, it's not the same. So I think it's just, how do we create excitement about having people just write to their senators, which we're trying to brainstorm, but we're not exactly sure at this moment. So it'll just be lots of experimenting.
For classmates, so for us, my answer isn't as specific, but we, as co-founders, we actually just met earlier in this week to kind of discuss restructuring our group, our organization, and just our plans for the rest of the year. And we have all these goals in mind, but I think a barrier that we may face is just honestly just not reaching all the goals that we have in mind. We really just want to grow and get more students and get more tutors involved, but maybe we just won't reach the number that we hope to reach. So I think with that, it's just kind of important to remember like why we started, and kind of just keep in mind that like starting an organization, it takes a lot of work and it can take years to make it into something that you want it to be. It can be hard for us because we had this goal in mind and we just kind of want it to play out exactly how we think it's going to play out in our head, and immediately be that within like a year. But we also just have to take a step back and remember that good things take time. So I think that's a barrier we'll probably face this year. But yeah, I think if we just continue to remember like why we started this, then we'll just keep going and progressing.
I think for Cincinnati for Justice, some barriers in the future would probably be just keeping up the momentum of what we've built, and also just creating tangible changes. And I know like my vision for it would be to have a place where we have a food pantry that's always available, a clothing bank, where people can come and collect stuff. But that requires money, that requires volunteers, that requires a space. And again, all of that requires money that we don't have. So it's just building up kind of what you guys said from the groundworks that we've laid, just building things up to where we want to see them. But it takes time and it takes expertise and it takes people and it takes money. So there's a lot that we want to do, but it's all in its time.
And then I just wanted to point out something. So AJ asked, can OSU students based in Columbus apply to be tutored for classmates? And Shreya said, yes, they're going to be reopening the tutor app soon, and they're going to email people in this webinar for info about applying. So if you want to elaborate on that, Shreya, you can.
Yeah, so we're actually gearing up to start our January recruitment season. So if you want, you can follow our Instagram that was put into the chat. We always post when we're opening our tutor apps again on Instagram. But then if we have access to this, we can also just email you the information. We can email you the information for applying once we open that up.
I would like to know, what are your favorite sources to obtain everyday news that are coming? Like personally, I love ACLU. I didn't know if you guys had any favorites as well.
Yeah, I would say for sources, I also like to follow the ACLU. NPR is another good, fairly unbiased source, I would say. And just another thing that I think is important is reading sources that are outside of the U.S. I know Al Jazeera News, that's another good one that's pretty nonpartisan for the most part. And it kind of provides more of that unbiased lens. And I think it can be hard, we're bombarded with the same couple of networks from inside the U.S., but I think it's important to get your news from outside. But for me personally, I actually get a lot of like breaking news, like from Twitter, which I think is popular for younger people. It's like really easy to see things that have just happened, you know, if you don't have the physical news on your TV screen or your laptop, whatever. So yeah, just getting information from a variety of sources, I think, is really important.
Yeah, exactly what Amna said, getting information from a variety of sources. I know that for me personally, sometimes I'm just like overwhelmed by how much news there is in a day. Like I'll try to open my news app and I like will just see so many different things going on. And I'm like, how do I decide like what's like important to me or like what is important that's going on? So I honestly feel like something that's helped me really sort of like figure out what to really pay attention to is I follow a lot of news sources Instagram pages and like Twitter profiles, and a lot of times they'll have the headlines right there. They'll like make the caption like the biggest takeaways from that news, and especially like again in our generation, Instagram and social media is something we all use a lot, so it's a really good way to, when you're engaging with those types of apps, make sure that you're also getting important information and keeping in touch with what's going on in the world.
And then I get my news, I listen to NPR on Spotify. And then I also am subscribed to a few different newsletters from the New York Times. So that's usually, it just gives a synopsis of the major stories from the previous day. And it's just, if you want to see something, it gives you the links to read the actual story, the full story. But that's usually what I get in my mailbox.
Okay, and then we have a question, actually for co-panelists from Amna. So question, what role has social media played for your organization?
So yeah, I can take this one. To begin with, a lot of our students actually, one of the biggest ways we recruited a lot of the students to actually receive tutoring from classmates was posting in various Facebook groups that are kind of like Facebook groups for the Dayton area. There's like a ton of like mutual aid Facebook groups or like Dayton, Ohio resource groups, things like that. That's been really, really helpful. And then from a tutor aspect, social media, using Instagram to kind of recruit our tutors, that's been really helpful in getting the word out, especially to people who, since it's been like harder to recruit through like things like involvement fair, things like that, social media has been a really good way to reach as many people as we can.
I would say for Poll Hero, I don't think we would have recruited the numbers that we did had we not used social media. We really relied on Instagram and Twitter. My sister ran the Twitter, so she would be DMing celebrities and asking them to retweet our stuff. But essentially our model is just creating virality in these different cities through our infographics. So we would reach out to students through Instagram, ask them to share our posts. And then that's actually Lucy Duckworth, who was featured on, she was kind of like, she talked for a lot of our features. And she's a student in Philadelphia, and she joined our project after seeing all of her friends post our infographics. And then we had a TikTok video that got under 200,000 views, which I'm not on TikTok. I think that's, I don't know how that number compares to like the TikTokers. But it's like our organization relied entirely on social media to get out the message.
I think Kennedy touched on it earlier, but it's pretty apparent that all your organizations really use younger people to get your message across. Do you guys hope to grow in that age demographic at all and get an older crowd, or do you think younger people are the best source of spreading this?
I think in terms of, sharing resources and whatnot on social media, it's going to be young people probably for a long time. But in terms of like volunteering or donating money and things like that, I definitely think engaging with the older demographic is definitely worth it, because it's not that we want to exclude those folks, but they're usually not as invested or engaged, and they don't even see this stuff on social media. And it sounds like for all three of our organizations, that's where we're talking about our organization the most and talking about our mission. So they might not see that information at all, but just engaging with them where we can. and finding a role for them. So I would say for Cincinnati for Justice, yes, I would love to engage with all different kinds of demographics. And we did have some middle-aged folks, older folks come to the protests, come to our workshops. So they can be engaged, but it's significantly less than I would say college age, high school age demographic.
That's exactly how it was for us. I think for me personally, I've lost faith in older people actually creating change. That's why we targeted younger people. So I think younger people will stick with them as kind of having them help us advance our mission. But you do need the older generation to amplify your work and to also provide resources. So we had, it was Stars in the House. They had a podcast on, and they just had different celebrities post their stuff on their social media accounts. So that was 100% part of our growth. I don't think we could have done it without them, but it really was the young people who kind of did the grassroots work and really kind of propelled us forward.
Yeah, for us, so far we've had mainly college students serve as tutors, but we have talked about and have actually had adults apply to be tutors. So the great thing about education is it's this sort of universal thing that everyone who has like gone through some sort of education system can help out younger students, whether that is that they have a high school degree or a college degree, or they've gotten an advanced degree. So that's the really great thing about it. So yeah, right now we've worked mainly with college students just because they have more time usually, but we are happy to have as many people from all age ranges join.
Awesome. And so we have a question from Mackenzie. So they said, with starting organizations during the pandemic, I would guess it is hard to have physical connections to the community. What hopes do you have for your organization once it is safe to gather in ways we can't today?
Okay, I'll go.
You can go.
All right. I would say for Cincinnati for Justice, definitely hold more community events and have, outdoor food drives, outdoor clothing drives, whatever. And obviously, hopefully not be masked 6 feet apart, and be able, as you said, to actually physically engage with the community, because I think that's important. Our whole organization is literally based on community. So it'd be nice to be able to connect with those people in all of the ways that we haven't so far. And probably be able to do more like food-oriented events, because right now that's obviously very testy. So I think there's just a lot more opportunities for what types of events we can actually hold, like once things settle down, which we'll see when that happens. So I'm looking forward to it.
And for us, because we started on Zoom, that's just our model is built around technology. So even when the restrictions and it's safe to go outside, just because our volunteers are from all over, we don't have a centralized location where we can meet. So I guess that's kind of the benefit, is that we really won't have to change much. It would be nice if we can meet in person. That's kind of hard to do when not many people are located in Cincinnati for us.
For us too, kind of the same thing as Kennedy. We started from a completely virtual standpoint, and our tutors and students, even when things maybe get back to a little bit more of a normal situation, will still continue tutoring online. So for us, a lot won't change in that regard, but we do hope community-wise to kind of bring our tutors closer together. So we've been kind of brainstorming ways where we can get tutors to kind of know each other more and have more of a community. So we're thinking about starting like a Slack page, if you guys are familiar with that, just so tutors are kind of more aware of who's doing what. And if anyone has any questions, they can just come to that and talk to each other through that. So we're trying to brainstorm more ways too, where we can develop a community. But for us, yeah, we're kind of lucky that not much will change, but we still want to make it as much of a tight-knit group as we can.
All right, let's give a few more moments to see if any more questions come in. While we wait, I will ask either Hannah or Connor to put in the link for MCC is offering an area for all to join and discuss yesterday's events. That's going to be available from 1 to 3, so we do have a little bit more time on that. And I am aware that all the viewers do have some individual time after this as well. All right, and it does seem like the questions have slowed. Do you guys have any closing remarks at all?
I would just say, well, thank you guys so much for having us. This was great to hear from Kennedy, Ashley, and Shreya. It was awesome to hear all of the work you guys are doing. And I guess my closing remarks would be, if you have something you want to see achieved, go for it. Kind of what Kennedy said earlier. It's never too early or too late to start something. And it sounds like a lot of us started these organizations within the past year. So that's in the middle of a pandemic. So honestly, anything is possible. So yeah, I would say if you have something you want to do, go for it and find the right people, find your group, and, establish your mission and do it. And I'm sure people will support you.
Yeah, to add to that, I'd say I'm assuming most of the people joining are Ohio State students. We're all really fortunate to attend the school that has just such a variety of departments and professors and people who are passionate about pretty much any issue. So if there is something you're passionate about, you do definitely have the resources to achieve those goals. So definitely take advantage of this time that you have in college to challenge yourself and connect with people who can help you fulfill those goals. Because it does definitely get harder once you graduate, but while we're in this now, it's really important to take advantage of the resources that we have.
And I just wanted to say thank you to the co-hosts for having us, and then to all the co-founders. I'm blown away by you guys. You guys are so impressive. So thank you so much for the work that you do.
All right, thank you guys so much. Oh, Ashley, say it.
Go ahead. I was just going to say the same thing as Kennedy. Yeah. Thank you, Olivia and Hannah, for hosting this for us. And then also Kennedy and Amna. Yeah, the work you guys are doing sounds amazing. I can't wait to learn more about it. And yeah, keep up the good work and good luck with continuing both of your guys' organizations.
All right. Thank you guys so much for having us. Me having you guys. It was really great getting to meet all of you. So I guess now it's time for goodbyes. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. And you guys are free to log off.